This morning we are going to look into the chaotic outcome of the emergency general meeting convened by some members of the Sorie-Sengbe Marrah on Wednesday, in protest of, the results of the association following elections that were held, in Kenema, among other things. In the studio this morning, we've been joined by barrister Augustine Sorie-Sengbe Marrah. Good morning and welcome to the program. Wake up, Sierra Leone.
Good morning, good morning. Happy to be here.
It seems as if the dust has not settled.
It hasn't, and a bit of clarifications before I start. Firstly, there were no elections conducted in Kenema on 18th May. Members have been very clear about that. And so when we came back from Kenema, as the laws prescribe, members' requisition an extraordinary general meeting, and the rules provide that they must give a 21-day notice to the directors, meaning the outgoing directors, Madam Swallow's court. Unfortunately, we did not get any response from them. The laws also prescribe that, in the event that there is a failure on the part of the directors to convene the EGM, members themselves, duly constituted, can convene the EGM, which they did, and they must give another 21 days notice. So the two 21 days period elapsed. That was our members convened the EGM on Wednesday, 10th July. At the New Brookfields Hotel grounds. So fundamentally, what they were seeking to do is to remove the directors, the Madam Swallow-led, executive, and install a caretaker body which will take the membership to a properly conducted AGM, where elections can be held consistent with the memorandum and articles of association of the company, Sorie-Sengbe Marrah Association, and in compliance with the basic threshold of democratic standards. We cannot say that we conducted elections when ballot papers were all over the ground. We ought to be good examples in terms of electoral decency and integrity. And we cannot characterize what occurred in Kenema by any stretch of the imagination as anything closer to elections.
Augustine, before we talk about the situation at New Brookfields Hotel, we would need to piggyback on the elections in Kenema. Your team is repeatedly saying there were no elections held. But when you come back to look at footage from happenings there, who really takes the blame for what happened when ballot boxes and papers were thrown all over the place, chairs even thrown at police officers? Who takes the blame for what happened?
So I'm happy that we're backing up a little bit. So first things first, there were certain demands that were made prior to 18th May 2024. Right, those demands were not met. Members, irrespective of all the challenges there were, showed up in Kenema in large number. And by the way, this is not Marrah's team demanding some accountability from the leadership of the Bar Association. Over 500 members of the Sorie-Sengbe Marrah Association signed a requisition for the EGM. But now coming back to what occurred in Kenema. So there were a number of things that went woefully wrong. First, the meeting was scheduled to commence at 1 p.m. And that meeting was called to order at 12 noon. And there's no excuse under the sun why a meeting that was communicated a month earlier for 1 p.m. was initiated, commenced at noon. That was the first spectacular blunder. In addition to that, Mr. Francis Ben-Kaifala, the anti-corruption commissioner, was nominated to act as returning officer. There were many objections. I took an objection to say, look up, we have a matter in court that touches and concerns the person of this gentleman, he cannot preside over the elections.
Why not?
So there are a number of things. One, there was an election for General Legal Council representatives, which also was very chaotic. What he did then was that members had lodged their proxies way in time. In compliance, they were received by the leaders. When we went into those elections, unfortunately, after members who were present had voted, Mr. Kaifala unilaterally shuts down the voting process and deprived all those who had proxies, had hundreds of proxies. So those who had proxies did not vote, even though they had lodged their proxies in compliance with the rules. So he deprived those colleagues who had then played by the rules, submitted their proxies. So that was the first contention. Secondly, we mentioned the fact that even the outgone executive, because the tenure was a year. So when they went to Bo about 2 years ago, they changed the tenure from a year to 2 years. We took that action to court. And guess who proposed that motion for the change of the tenure? Mr. Kaifala. So all of those put together, and members said, in fact, a day or two before this election, Mr. Kaifala was seen visibly hobnobbing with one of the candidates, Madam Tuma Jabi.
But
so
what makes that wrong, Augustine, when aside from the fact that he is anti-corruption commissioner, in that capacity, he was there as a lawyer. And lawyers amongst yourselves, there's camaraderie, there are friends amongst friends, and obviously, whoever the returning officer was going to be had friends amongst the candidates. Absolutely. What makes it wrong? Absolutely.
I think in terms of friendship and the parameters of friendship, I think I would stand, a greater chance in terms of quantum, really. But what I am saying, when you put all these into context, it makes Mr. Kaifala ineligible to serve in that role. And by the way, there was a counter motion. So even if you were to agree that those did not add up to disqualifying, what ought to have been done was to put the motion for Mr. Kaifala's appointment and a counter motion for Mr. Julius Naikofi's appointment to a vote. That was not done. Mr. Kaifala was imposed, and by the way, this all occurred.
But for the information going around is that you, as a candidate, had appointed 2 other people who declined the nomination to serve as returning officer.
Oh yes, there were 2, but not Julius Naikofi. I nominated personally Umo Napoleon Koma. He declined. I nominated Honorable Indolo Givao. He declined. Both declined, but not Mr. Julius Naikofi. And he had set the record straight by publishing a statement to say my nomination was seconded and I did not decline. That counter motion was not put to vote. Mr. Kaifala was imposed on members, and this all occurred before 1 p.m., the time slated for commencement of the AGM. And that is not just the end of the story. Additionally, there were certain matters that were listed to be transacted at an annual general meeting in accordance with the law.
And this is where we, the rest of the people, get confused, because the accounts of what transpired seem to vary now by individuals. One instance you get to hear that the meeting itself was supposed to start at 12, starting with other items on the agenda. The elections was what was supposed to come probably around 1 p.m.
No. Let me make this clear. Registration and arrival was put for 12 to 1. That's when you arrive and register. 1 o'clock is prayers, opening prayers. That was meant to start the meeting. At noon, meant for arrival, meaning an hour long. So they were contemplating folks who would travel from Bo, for example, to Kenema. So within that hour, you were meant to have arrived at Kenema, register in readiness for the start of the AGM. That did not take place. So at the very hour of 12, that was when the meeting was called to order, and the item number 8, elections. So many people left Freetown because we know that usually for annual general meeting and the elections, it would come probably towards the evening. Elections would run into the night. You know, the last one we had at Bintumani, for example, it lasted till 5 a.m. So members had contemplated, I was going to drive from Freetown. I leave my house in Freetown at noon. I drive up to Kenema. I cast my vote at 5 p.m. because the calculation was that voting would commence around 5 because it was item number 8. So when you lift that up and superimpose that on item number 1, which was arrival and registration, 12 to 1 p.m., then you were essentially disenfranchising colleagues who were even traveling. And by the way, some colleagues who were traveling from Bo were blocked off by a truck that magically, miraculously, whichever you prefer, blocked their journey to Kenema. And they waited several minutes, if not an hour. By the time they got to Kenema, nominations had already been done, presided over by Mr. Kaifala. And that was when members naturally protested at the accumulation of irregularities. And I don't think that anybody on earth should fault people for standing up, seeking to correct wrongs.
There are issues around, the behavior, circumstances and, let's say, attitude of some barristers. Before now, a lot of people respected the bar. It was perhaps by far one of the most prestigious, places or associations a gentleman or a lady would want to belong to.
Absolutely.
But given in light of recent circumstances, recent happenings, I'm not sure there is much, when you talk about integrity, respect and decency in society. Do you still feel proud to be a lawyer today?
Absolutely. I don't think there's
even when chairs were thrown, blows were sent?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any profession. I would have loved to be a journalist, but I chose becoming a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
But let me just make this clarification. I think in history we have seen instances in which people who have protested at wrongs, they were characterized as, trying to avoid the word, but terrorists. For example, Nelson Mandela, they were decent lawyers. He set up the first black law firm in Soweto, for example. That man left his practice and he started to challenge apartheid. And he was branded a terrorist. Because throughout history, when the perpetrator does wrong, he would then also want to control the narrative in terms of how the oppressed would react to oppression. Right? So naturally, when you look at the conduct of lawyers and you separate that from the wrongs that have been systematically conducted and committed against them, then I don't think that you do justice to the reaction. Because these are folks who have driven all the way from Freetown, spent a day or two before the annual general meeting against the backdrop that members wanted the AGM to be held in Freetown because of traveling constraints, accommodation, etc., etc. But they did not get that. They summed up courage to say, let's show up in Kenema and cast our votes. They showed up. To their surprise, a meeting which was meant to be commenced at 1 started at noon, and several other irregularities. And even when the chairman of General Legal Council, the regulator, perhaps like the IMC chair, would say, oh, I sit during a large AGM and I see a number of things being conducted wrongly. So he stood up to say, we're going to play by the book. We're going to ensure that democratically we conduct this election. What happened? Mr. Kaifala stood up and he yanked the mic off that gentleman in spectacular fashion. So again, when members reacted, and by the way, I've written about this, that in a democracy, everyone has a right to protest. What we do not have a right to is undermine state security or unseat a legitimate government. But you do not have to prescribe to us how we conduct ourselves in terms of protests to wrongs that have been conducted spectacularly. So that was what we called. And I know that a number of things have gone wrong in terms of, that chipper wear the image of the legal profession. I get that. But what we're seeking to do for the first time is to draw a line in the sand and to say that never again would we sit by and see wrongs being done by other members, a small group of people, that would tarnish the image of the legal profession. That is what members are seeking to do. And that is why they braved, amidst the obstacles on Wednesday, showed up at New Brookfields Hotel to tell a story and to continue to rewrite the story of the Sierra Bar Association. And that is what we're poised to do.
Let's come to the Brookfields Hotel. What happened there? Again, total rancor. You are being pushed around by police officers.
Absolutely.
And the likes. Couldn't there have been a way around this?
Absolutely.
Preventing the obvious, indecent spectacle of things.
Absolutely. I think it's worrying for us because we thought that we played by the books. We gave first 21 days notice. Madam Swallow did not respond, not a liner, not a text, not a syllable from her, nothing. The law says give another 21 days to say the members themselves would convene this meeting. We did. We paid for the New Brookfields Hotel. We prepared file packs for lawyers, over 400 file packs. We catered for the events. We had a contract with New Brookfields Hotel. We showed up. Unfortunately, as early as 6 a.m., before 7 a.m., when members were plying the Jomo Kenyatta route, they witnessed and saw trucks of police officers. So that was when the signal started coming through. So when we went there, myself and Madam Say Kamal at 10, were only able to gain entrance into New Brookfields Hotel because we said that we were guests and we had already booked with a small team of organizers. Towards midday, the police were now restricting movement into a private facility that had been booked by members of the Bar Association. And by the way, we have not said that we are the leaders. We have not said that we were elected. We have not said that we are directors. We have only said that we are members. And nobody has challenged our membership. Nobody has challenged the membership of these hundreds of lawyers who were chosen to meet at New Brookfields Hotel and pass certain resolutions, I beg your pardon. Unfortunately, when the police had an interaction with the police, they said to us very, very clearly that they had instructions not to allow the meeting.
Instructions by?
From the Inspector General of Police. And so by, I think, 1 p.m., I got a call from the head of media that the IG wanted to meet with me so we can have discussion. Unfortunately, I was poised to provide leadership for the EGM. So I did not heed to that call at all. Unfortunately, we were not able to hold the meeting at the scheduled venue. Even when we sent out a notice to members to say, don't bother to come to New Brookfields Hotel because you won't be given entrance. Members showed up at the gates of the hotel. And that was when we came out and proceeded to hold the EGM in the open, in the rain, in front of the gates, defying all odds, with the litany of police officers brandishing rifles and tear gassing equipment. Despite all those odds, members showed up and we held the EGM and we passed certain resolutions, which, if you allow me to talk a bit about. So essentially what they did was that members resolved to remove Edina Swallow and her entire executive from office. Once that was done by resolution, they also resolved to install a caretaker body with their simple theory is to ensure that they conduct an AGM within 30 days. Hold an AGM and conduct elections. Elections that lawyers can be proud of. Elections that would serve as an example to politicians. Because we advise politicians. We advise them on electoral laws nationally. If we conduct elections, or we purport to conduct elections from the ground in chaos, in an atmosphere filled with pepper spray, I don't think that would have legitimacy to call out these folks nationally when they misspeak figures, putting it mildly, or when they dabble in any electoral irregularities. So that is why members were very clear that we must be shining examples of electoral integrity, and that is why they have set up a caretaker committee. And that body, by the way, is comprised of senior legal practitioners. Okay. 4 out of the 5 caretaker members are past presidents. Mr. Shears Moses, Mr. Elvis Kagbo, Madam Woda Sofian Kagbo, Madam Basita Michael, all 4 of them were past presidents. The only gentleman who's not a past president, but who is over 15 years at the bar, is Mr. Musanu Kamara. And by the way, there was a nomination for the chairman of the General Legal Council, which is a regulator. Members said no. So there was no seconder for that motion. There was no seconder for that motion. So their simple task now is to take lawyers to a properly conducted AGM, where the stewardship of the association would be given, and then members will be at liberty to vote for the person of their choice to lead the association.
Do you think all of these will further exacerbate the violence that has been happening in your organization? There is a particular executive, although you do not regard them.
No, we don't, and the members don't as well.
I'm left wondering, do you have the propensity, the capacity to do this?
Absolutely.
To convene another election and have the current executive removed?
So the current executive has been able to, so there's no other executive other than a caretaker committee. Those persons who are parading themselves are not recognized by the members. And by the way, I've said, at the risk of repeating myself, I've said to Madam Tuma Jabi, if you want elections this evening, if you believe that the votes given to you by Mr. Kaifala, the 560 number, if you believe in those numbers, we can conduct elections at AYV here and now. Lawyers would show up and I would vote you. Lawyers would show up at any time, today, this evening, wherever, we can show up because we believe that we have the numbers. She doesn't have the numbers. So we do not countenance her at all in the game. What we're emphasizing on is that lawyers must be given the opportunity to cast their ballots in a decently conducted elections that all of us can be proud of.
I want to indeed inform our viewer that indeed an invitation, was tendered to the current executive of the Bar Association for them to be represented here this morning, but they couldn't come. They declined our invitation. We just wanted to have a balance of the conversation. This is no way perpetrating one-sidedness because we had reached out. Just wanted to clarify that.
Augustine, I would take you back to Kenema, but just before we head back to events that unfolded in Kenema, which is the premise of the current situation, the question that has popped up, the situation between the Sierra Leone police and members for the EGM at New Brookfields Hotel is, what business does the Sierra Leone police have to prevent lawyers from converging for an EGM when it's not a protest that was planned in a private space? But answering to that question, we've also seen answers on social media. People saying, well, that's because what they were about to do would further create chaos for an executive that has been recognized even by the president of Sierra Leone. Where do your thoughts align in all of the question and the answer session that seem to be going viral on social media?
Absolutely. I think I agree with the sentiments that the police have no business meddling into the affairs of a company. By the way, the Sierra Leone Bar Association is a company limited by guarantee. And by the way, companies hold meetings almost every minute, if I'm not exaggerating. And nobody requires clearance from the police for corporate meetings. Nobody, right? And we have always held our AGM and our EGMs all the time without clearance from the police. And by the way, we were not meant to hold the EGM in the open. So that was why we paid for a private space in an enclosed space. Right? The chairs were packed, everything was packed, the files were packed. So it was meant to be an indoor event, totally indoor, in a private gated business premises. Right? So we're very surprised when the police showed up. I had myself and Sorie-Sengbe Marrah had a conversation with the gentleman in charge, Mr. Marrah. It was very, very clear that he had instructions not just to allow lawyers to enter into New Brookfield Hotel's premises, but to even enter into the hall that was booked, already paid for. So they shut that down with, barricaded that with lots of police officers. So this is very worrying. It's very worrying because when you see that, and by the way, members are the highest organ of a company. So members can legitimately elect directors this morning and fire them at noon. Legitimately. Let's assume they were legitimately elected and appointed in the morning. Members can fire them in the afternoon. So members are the highest organ in a company, right? So when they have complied with the laws by giving the 221 days period notices, they have convened an EGM. What you do is to allow them to pass certain resolutions. But once you interfere with that process and you allow those persons whom the members have said that they do not recognize, do not represent them, then it means that there's an apparent appearance of bias. Because on the one hand, state institutions are giving red carpets to these persons that members do not recognize. And the members who ought to be their what's the word? I'm trying to find the word. Their bosses. Yes, that's the word. Their bosses are being pushed and shoved aside. Their bosses.
Augustine.
So we hire them, assuming there was regularity. Assuming there was irregularity, the members should be their bosses. You give preference to them. You welcome them in these state spaces. But when the members, their bosses, want now to pass resolutions touching and concerning these persons, you then obstruct them. So there is an apparent appearance of bias.
What would be the actions going forward, especially against the Sierra Leone police, for preventing you from holding an EGM within the space you wanted to hold it?
Absolutely. So yesterday we published a press statement condemning categorically and unequivocally the actions of the police. We're contemplating certain actions. I'm not new to dragging the police to court, so that is not off the list, but we will take it a day at a time. We've put out that statement. We will take the next action points, but definitely there will be accountability, not just for Wednesday, but if you recall in Kenema, certain female lawyers were being manhandled by the police, but not just Kenema. If you also follow the incident with those two female lawyers who were being summoned at the CID and detained, and lawyers showed up to show solidarity, and our female lawyers especially, you know, by the way, I think on one of the incidents, one of your colleagues was there, and his mobile phone was confiscated from him, I had to plead to the police to say, by the way, he's a journalist. You know, you can take his phone from him. That's his tool, you know, of his trade. So all of these, when you put them together, there's an urgency in terms of police accountability, and we would get to that eventually.
Augustine, I'll take you back to Kenema. I asked you earlier, who is to blame? Who takes responsibility for how events unfolded? I asked you that because from the videos, you would see that there was some amount of violence, even against police officers. Chairs were thrown at some of the police officers, and even amongst members. But not once did we see you, as a presidential candidate, whether at the venue or on social media, appeal to your supporters to be calm and abstain from violence. Not once did we see you, as a candidate, even issue an apology to other members who were there who were not interested in violence for the violence. So it brings us back to who takes responsibility. So are you innocent in all of this?
Yes, let me just make some clarification. So I do not characterize all what we call as violence. I know there was protests.
It is violence because the dictionary gives us a meaning of what violence. These words have meaning, so
we can differ on them.
We can play on them, but they have meanings.
We can differ on characterizations. What I'm saying is that, so to be very clear, when the police, use pepper spray, we had to get most of the members out of the hall, because then it was very chaotic. So that action very clearly would tell you that there was leadership on our part to get the folks out, and we addressed them in the lawn, and by the way, we sang the national anthem. You know, that would tell you that we were not a violent group. We wanted compliance with the laws. But now back to the main question, who takes responsibility? Again, I have said that there's no way we can put responsibility past Madam Swallow. And I can tell you why. Before Kenema,
should she and her executive take all the blame?
We would slice the blame. I'll come to other folks. Firstly, we sent several letters to Madam Swallow, members cataloging a number of concerns to say it will be difficult for younger lawyers to make their way to Kenema, to book accommodation, etc., etc. We did not get any response from Madam Swallow. So it was definitely in silence for like 2 months prior to Kenema. So the events in Kenema did not suddenly occur. There were certain antecedents to Kenema. And by the way, we wrote to the IG 2 letters. Madam Sorie-Sengbe Marrah, especially, wrote to the IG 2 letters requesting meeting with the IG to say we're going to the AGM in Kenema. We would like to discuss security concerns with you. At some point, he scheduled a meeting, and that meeting was cancelled in the morning. We were notified that the IG was unavailable. The president of the bar never accommodated us, never engaged us, never for once sat down with any of us to discuss the concerns. So the omission to take leadership or to show leadership prior to Kenema, and if you had seen one of the videos in which she came, apparently she came in after 12 in anticipation that the meeting would start at 1, and the meeting had commenced behind her back. You'll see that in that video when she says, for example, that I don't know why the meeting started at noon. I was not informed. And she left immediately. She left the premises. So she was not there when all of those that was captured on social media ensued. She was not there. So we cannot put the blame past the leader. She was the leader. She was meant to pass on the mantle on that day. The very day she was meant to pass the mantle, that was when she turned her back on the association, went back to her hotel. That was when all the chaos, right? That was all when the protests ensued.
What part of the blame falls at your doorstep?
No. So we can. Now that's what I explained. I said when the oppressor does wrong, right? They cannot now dictate to the oppressed or the victim the manner in which they react to oppression, right? Looking back, we would say that maybe the protest was a little over the top. You could have done it that way. But on the spur of the moment, when wrongs have been spectacularly perpetrated, it's very, very difficult on the spur of the moment to control the manner in which protests are done. So what we did after, the apparent show of displeasure by members, we had to get members out of the hall, in the forecourt of the premises, and address them, sang the national anthem, and members dispersed.
This has dragged on for so long.
Yes.
And on social media, some people had been suggesting, well, just set up a committee, another tripartite committee, and figure out what the issues are and move forward. One of the conversations here on AYV with lawyer Rashid Dumbuya, he mentioned that the association does not have a constitution, and you do not have an electoral body, say for example like SLAJ, which has a whole body set up to man elections. How can the legal-minded, our learned colleagues, not have figured this out?
So our constitution, by the way, we have a constitution. The M&A is the constitution of a company. I agree with Mr. Rashid Dumbuya that M&A is not fit for purpose. It was done in 1999, 2000. The realities then are different.
And as learned as you all are, our learned colleagues, you've not been able to identify that is a potential threat. As much as you've been able to identify it in the nation, that our 1991 constitution needs to be reviewed.
If you followed my campaign vision, one of the 5 vision points was to define the character of the company. I have said that we should move away from becoming a company to we can be a non-subvented statutory body set up by Parliament. Because, by the way, I've explained to people that you can't have a private company, and you have several laws that refer to that private company as, or 2 representatives from Sierra Leone Bar Association, and it's a private company. What if the members decide to dissolve? All those laws now that recognize the Sierra Leone Bar Association would be rendered nugatory. So you can't have a private company and you have laws that recognize that private entity. So you can have a non-subvented, because members have raised the concerns about, if we become now a statutory body, government starts giving us money. I know that SLAJ is in that category now. Government starts giving us money, they would control our independence. But I have said that we have a model in which you can be a non-subvented. So you can be a statutory body set up by Parliament, but you do not receive subventions from government. We can still have donations and grants, etc., and contributions from members. So that's where you would then shield the association of shield the independence of the association. Because we know that once government starts giving monies to the leaders, they will determine their tune.
I saw a letter. You've been invited by the Attorney General.
Yes, that came in yesterday.
Do you? Is that a way of saying, okay, goodbye to the rancor?
I cannot speculate. I think the content of the letter do not say much. But the Attorney General, by the way, is the titular head of the bar. Like you have in England, the monarch is the titular head of state. So it carries enormous respect. So we members are very clear. They are very clear. They have set up a caretaker body with specific role. So whatever is being done by the Office of the Attorney General must fit into the frame that is already properly created.
If it doesn't.
It's an invite, and in Africa, we big man call you, you show up out of respect.
But you didn't show up when the IG called you on Wednesday?
Because there was already a call for duty on my part, and I was leading. So yes, we would.
What if the propositions of the Attorney General eventually, do not fit or dovetail with your resolutions? What happens?
Well, our resolutions are consistent with the wishes of the members, and they are the highest organ. And I think that the members ought to be respected every step of the way. And by the way, they have not, the resolution is not unreasonable. They have not said that they want they want some tent on planet Mars. No, they have only said give us an AGM and properly conduct elections.
That has cost implications as well.
Oh, you're talking about cost, eh? We spent a lot of money, a lot of money. It breaks my heart every time that I think about folks, especially for me. I was in the middle, so I had private donations from folks who believe in me. I went to Kenema and spent all these resources. Breaks my heart all the time. So I think nobody should talk about cost, because all of us, some way, somehow, have lost monies in this process. And I think that we should not sacrifice decency and orderliness on the altar of cost expenses.
You've now been accused to be pro-APC by your alignment with Marrah Sorie-Sengbe, and that you both are fighting together against Toma, who has been pointed fingers at as pro-SLPP. Is the situation in the Bar Association currently an APC-SLPP battle?
No. Absolutely.
And are you pro-APC?
No. I mean, I've always said on TV, on radio, that I'm not a member of any political party, but I think that people should understand that when people are aggrieved, they can coalesce, right? At some point, the ANC, there are several other entities in South Africa, the Pan-African Union, etc., etc. When they were fighting apartheid, they did not care about ideology. They said, let's come together and fight apartheid first. When we succeed, we can now come back to our ideologies. So essentially what we're trying to do now is to say, let's come together, ensure that we give sanity to the association. Once we get a date for an AGM and elections, we will then decide. But I'm not pro-APC. I'm not a member of APC. I'm not a member of SLPP. I'm not a member of any political party. I am Team Sierra Leone. My interest, my focus is Sierra Leone. And that's my vision. And I think that what occurred, I understand that we have a lot of political interference problems at the bar. I'm not denying that. But what occurred in Kenema cannot be put past Madam Swallow, Mr. Kaifala, who presided over an activity in which he called elections, right? But we cannot say that what occurred in Kenema, in terms of the irregularities, has now resulted into an APC and SLPP. No. The members who showed up in the rain before Brookfields Hotel were not APC members. They were members of the Sierra Leone Bar Association. And people should learn to respect the wishes of the membership of the Sierra Leone Bar Association. And we must not reduce all of what has occurred into this narrative of SLPP and APC. We get the point of political interference, but let's be clear.
Augustine,
that what occurred
I'm so sorry to interrupt you there, but we would come back to continue the conversation in a moment, and we would also be taking some of our Facebook messages, but it's 9 o'clock. Let's go on a quick commercial break.
In the meantime, it's time for us to see what you've been sending to our Facebook page. We'll just sift through the messages briefly. Fibian, do you want to start?
Okay, Abbas Abib Koka Bangali says, why are these group of lawyers protesting? The only honorable protest I expect from any lawyer is when they use what they have learned, use their experience to fight for the right of people in the court of law. All I saw was a group of people who are disgruntled, behaving like any Adebayo rioters. no educated lawyer will create a situation where police can use tear gas to dispatch them. Police stopping a large number of lawyers from holding a meeting, but they can't do anything about it. Are these lawyers afraid of their own profession or what?
Swissman is saying, Augustine, please tell us more about the intake of the Chief Justice and the Attorney General in the country, with all the circumstances lawyers had gone through during the election and after the election. What the Chief Justice and the Attorney General have said to resolve the situation and the incidents that occurred in the hotel on the day in question.
Usman Kavoni says, were there any irregularities in the electioneering process and procedure? If there was, what could you please elaborate in details?
By Mori Conte, I hope the lawyers are trying to correct some certain issues that are going on in the country, why the government should intervene.
Koro Jane says the actions of the so-called Bar Association is nothing but an opposition attitude to the highest. A person like Thomas More, he is 100% APC. All we see is just APC hooliganism. Shaka Brahima says, yes, it is, Mr. Marrah. You are in the APC camp. Toma is in the SLPP camp. Vincent Horace says, when one fights a just cause in Sierra Leone, it is always tied down to political party loyalism. So many other messages. Sola Desmond says, I have been following Mr. for long and believe in his dream, but please never join APC or SLPP. Stand alone. I'm going to read law because of you. Okay, I think I'd limit the messages to those for now. Is your internet back up?
No,
okay,
no,
Augustine.
So a couple of things. I know that people have raised concerns about whether, why we did not go to court.
And just pardon me to add this person, Abdullahi Bilukule is asking you, Mr. Marrah, why do you why don't you approach the legal method by going to court and challenge the legitimacy of the election rather than going around and organizing groups to create problem?
Okay, I think this question, particular question, has come up several times, and I think I need to make that clarification that firstly, the Sierra Leone Bar Association is a company. The companies are regulated by the Companies Act of 2009. It has some amendments. So there are certain provisions in terms of when members are aggrieved in company law. The first step is not to go to court. The first step is to comply with certain rules. So if members are aggrieved and they want to remove directors, right, they can requisition the directors to convene an EGM. If the directors do not convene an EGM, they can convene that EGM themselves. That is one. But again, I think people should understand that we are not afraid of going to court. I took the executive of Madam Swallow to court on the instructions of Mr. Julian Cole as the plaintiff. And we were in court for 2 years. We took them to court. Mr. Cole filed, instructed me to file that action to say that the manner in which they changed their tenure from 1 year to 2 years was unlawful. And guess what? The case lasted beyond the very 2-year tenure. So are you faulting somebody who went to court to challenge the change of tenure, and that case lasted beyond the tenure of the very person they were seeking to correct their tenure? And that case, by the way, was in court up until the time we went to Kenema, that case. And in addition to that case, there was also another action filed touching and concerning the AGM. So there were already 2 matters in court. So the thing about court action, people should know there were already 2 cases in court. One of them which was filed 2 years earlier. So there's no point in telling members go to court, go to court. We respect the court system, but there are laws provided. And these are the laws that have been set in motion. These are the laws that members are using. The law says members can call an AGM. And by the way, nobody has said, and I'm challenging anyone to say that members do not have the right to convene an EGM. Nobody has said that. Not even those who are parading themselves as directors now. No, nobody has said that. So why should members bother to go to court when they can have and use the laws of Sierra Leone to convene a meeting and pass certain resolutions? So that is insofar as the court actions are concerned. Somebody asked about the CJ and the AG, what they have done. I have to be very clear, the Chief Justice is not a member of the Bar Association. Judges are not members of the Bar Association. If we file action in court, that's when the judges will sit on those actions. But insofar as the botched AGM is concerned, there's no action in court. So we do not expect the judiciary to come in, at this stage. The AG, like I've explained, is the titular head of the bar. It's the ceremonial head of the bar. Again, I noted the fact that we received a letter yesterday from him. Some people say that it should have come in earlier than yesterday, but we cannot speculate. Maybe all of these concerns that, all of these resolutions that members have passed, setting up the caretaker, may have been that the AG is seeking to say, okay, why not? I'm going to ensure that they are effected. So nobody's going to speculate. The meeting is today. We will go there, but the concerns and the positions of the members of the association are very clear. They want an AGM and they want properly conducted elections. Somebody spoke about whether there were irregularities, the elections. Our position is there were no elections because there are a number of things that we have said. The fact of the commencement of the meeting, the imposition of Mr. Francis Kaifala, but more importantly, the fact that there was no voter list. Nowhere in the world would you conduct an election without a voter list. You've seen the videos. Mr. Kaifala giving ballot papers like a proud parent dishing puff cake to kids. He will look you and say, I'll give you 2, I'll give you 5, I'll give you 7. Maybe because of your hairstyle or your lipstick or whatever it is, So you would see very clearly in the video there was no voter list. We went into those elections as presidential candidates. We wrote several letters to say, give us the list at least 48 hours before. Nobody gave us. Nobody. So how can you say you conducted? So there's no talk, there shouldn't be any talk about irregularities when there was in fact no voter list. So all of those put together, the members have taken a position that there were no elections in Kenema for any office at the bar. And consequently, they have installed a caretaker body whose responsibility it is to conduct an AGM and properly conduct elections for the leadership of the bar. And that's the position. I think the other comments are complimentary. The gentleman who said he's going to breed law because of me, God bless his heart, and I wish him the best.
And other comments still on the APC, the pro-APC and...
Oh, yes. So I like this stance because, by the way, during the APC, I was called pro-SLPP. In fact, I remember a colleague saying very clearly that I was SLPP surrogate. And when we set up the Renaissance movement, so I am not new to tags. I mean, whenever you do this sort of work, and I've always said to people that as an activist, when you do activism, the group that benefits from your work is the opposition. So naturally, they would lump you with the opposition. In this case, I have said that 3 factions, there were 3 factions for the elections. One faction has benefited from the wrongs committed by Mr. Kaifala. So they are not aggrieved. The 2 other factions and the general membership of the bar, they have taken a position that the elections did not hold. we cannot be divided in that opinion. So there is a unison in opinion that there were no elections. So we're pursuing this, and we have pursued this to a point that we have now installed a caretaker body. So there's no unity of teams. There's unity of purpose in pursuing, making sure that what was done in Kenema is corrected, and that is what we have done. So that does not make me APC. I have said I am not SLPP, I'm not APC. This fight is not between SLPP and APC. This fight is between the members of the association taking back the destiny from the hands of Madam Swallow, who has turned her back on the association, and that is what we're going to pursue. How
confident are you that the elections you've now set up the body to conduct would hold, when a simple, perhaps, EGM was prevented from holding by the police? How confident are you now that another elections would hold?
I mean, I think I'm just an optimistic soul, so I'm very confident that somehow, somewhat, with the press statements and the next action points against the police would see reason. By the way, I spoke to a very senior person in government who was very visibly outraged by the conduct of the police. And so we intend to, I guess that the caretaker body, the responsibility would be to engage the police to say, we have this responsibility to conduct an AGM. We are going to conduct the AGM at so and so venue. We need your protection, etc., etc. If there is need for them, to have police protection, etc., etc., they would then pursue that line. But I'm very optimistic, and members are poised. If you call an AGM today in the sun, in the rain, members would show up in record numbers to cast their votes, to tell a story that never again that lawyers can be characterized as hooligans, as people who do not respect the laws, as people who cannot conduct regular elections. We want it to be told very, very clearly that we have a capacity to be law-abiding, we have a capacity to conduct free, fair, and credible elections, and perhaps set standards for the institutions in government.
Who would you be suing, if at all you were suing someone from the Sierra Police?
The Inspector General of Police. I've sued him once. Members would sue, definitely. When we get to that point, would sue the Inspector General of Police. Again, I've said that when we spoke with the gentleman, Mr. Moyjoy, at New Brookfield Hotel, he was very clear that he was under instructions from the IG to shut down the hall. And, as an officer, he abides by instructions. So he carried that to the teeth.
Right.
How do you see this playing out as a conclusion that can settle the dust?
Absolutely. I think many members have said, and by the way, it warms my heart that some folks whom you think that they are not interested in the bar politics, etc., have called me, to say that for the first time I'm paying my dues. We want to be part of this process. Because maybe we have stayed on the fences for so long and things have degenerated to such an extent. So I'm very confident that members would want at this stage to write another story for the Bar Association. I know that we have become the laughing stock in society for so long because obviously the injustices there, in society, and people think that it's lawyers and the judiciary. But this is a step that lawyers are taking to say it's a long walk, we recognize, but it's a day at a time. Members are saying that if we sanitize this, if we ensure that we have proper elections, we ensure that we have a candidate that is elected by popular vote in a credible election, that will be the first step to a long journey of sanitizing the bar, so that the bar would reclaim its nobility, so that we would reclaim our voice, so that the Bar Association will be taken seriously yet again by players and by state institutions in Sierra Leone.
We want to thank you very much indeed, Barrister Augustine Sorie-Sengbe Marrah, for gracing our program this morning.
Thank you too. Thank you for your
We wish you well, and we hope and pray that the dust is settled soon.
Absolutely.
So that you could, if you can, regain your lost glory.
Absolutely.